Coca Cola is so classic and it is timeless in a way. You can look at any of the merchandising, the billboards, the case cards, everything that they've made. This is something that if it gets unearthed 200 years later, people will be like, that's cool. That's a Coke ad. And that will still feed into their strategy 200 years later.
Hey everyone, this is Rob Wiltsey, and welcome to another episode of the E-Commerce Pros podcast. We're talking today with Kip Parra, who is the Associate Brand Manager at Stella Rosa Wines. Stella Rosa Wines is one of the most well-known wine brands in the country. San Antonio Winery and their parent company is their parent company and has been around for over 100 years. And so you know this brand, you've seen them at all your stores, and hopefully you've had some of their delicious wine and their brandy now, which is just incredible. So since they've been around for 100 years, they know how to adapt to change. And what we're going to talk about today is how brands can adopt to change over incredible spans of time. And so I'm really excited today to be talking with Kip Parra, who's going to tell us all about his philosophy on this. So Kip, thank you so much for being on the E-Commerce Pros podcast. And why don't we start by just having you share a little bit about your background, a little bit about how you ended up at San Antonio Winery, and what gets you out of bed in the morning.
Honestly, I don't really want to talk about what gets me out of bed in the morning because I think it's just the universal fear of the inevitable. But
Right.
yeah, no, I honestly, I am so excited to be here and kind of share with you, story because, honestly, it has not been, a straight line, as a lot of people's careers often aren't. But I kind of got my start, back working as a digital strategist with CBS Radio, which is very interesting because, everyone kind of, knows that radio is a very unique position for, a lot of marketers because it's very, terrestrial. It's very classic in terms of how it fits into, all of your strategies. But it was an interesting start to a career because that ended up taking me to within the alcohol industry. I became the digital director at Mezcala Silencio, which was a very interesting company to be a part of during the Mezcal boom, which is still kind of ongoing. But after that, I found myself here working with the winery, and so I'm very happy to have the opportunity to help develop their Stella Rosa brandy line specifically. But that's not to say that we're still not giving a whole lot of love to the wines. Yeah.
San Antonio Winery, which is the parent company of Stella Rosa Wines, was founded. It's like over 100 years ago now, right? So it was like 1917, so 100
Right.
106 years ago or so.
Yeah.
So how does a brand like that was started so long ago, how do in your view, how does a brand last that long? How does a brand stay relevant that long? Because now you have Stella Rosa Wines as just one of the most relevant wine companies, one of the best branded wine companies, in my opinion, that's out here. How does a brand do that? What are some of those guiding principles that you think got the company this far?
I mean, a lot of people understand that success is just opportunity and luck. So I think those definitely come into play, all times. But what's unique about, again, having this entire history, like you said, over 100 years of winemaking experience, especially local here in LA, it kind of puts you in a position of understanding, heritage, and understanding the importance of staying power. And, Stella Rosa has not been around for 100 years. But, that's not to say that that type of wine isn't also, a very heritage focused, beverage in Italy. And so that's one of the things that we like to kind of pride ourselves on is, we have recently become the number one imported wine in America. We just, overtook Yellowtail, which is a great accomplishment,
Wow.
but, again, coming from that essence of, we are an import, we are kind of creating a through fare for consumers here to taste something that, somebody in the northern area of Italy is familiar with. But the first time you try Stella Rosa, most people are surprised. A lot of what we say is like we're in the wine category, we're in the wine section, but the brand itself is not, utilized like any other wine company. It's not, to the same, echelon of practices in terms of, how people look at, tastings and awards and things like that. It is its own beast, which is kind of why, again, I brought up that opportunity and luck, because I think we found a perfect niche to really, create a moment for new consumers to the wine category to try something that is different. It's not the wine you think, the the rich people are drinking on their yachts.
Yeah, it's delicious. For anyone who hasn't tried it, first of all, like where have you been? Try this stuff. It's amazing. And also, what are some trends that you feel like Stella Rosa, the brand in particular, was able to really navigate well over the last 5 years? Say, is there any? I've noticed, kind of being doing a bit of work with you all, actually watching you all adapt to some trends on social media, and even doing really cool event activations, and giant giant champagne flutes and things like that. So
Yeah.
yeah, how it was so exciting. How what I want to talk about, and something we talked about on the call before this, was creating trends as opposed to just following trends.
Hmm.
How does a brand create a trend, and how does Stella Rosa approach that?
Yeah. It's that is the, $500,000 question, right? Is because you want to be the trendsetter. You want to be, the person owning that conversation. And it's a very difficult thing to do, because I think often, I staying power earlier. You have to understand that audiences these days, uh, Gen Z specifically, it's, focused on feeling good, being authentic. And that's not to say that also, the generation before that, dealing with millennials, are looking at a lot of nostalgia type factors. So, to be a legacy brand puts you in a wonderful position to where you're already set up for, for a prime success. It's just a matter of your execution and understanding of those audiences. If you're a newer brand, though, I think you're in an even more interesting position, because you can start any conversation you want, and you're in a position where it's going to be unique. It's going to be unique to what you're doing. It's going to be unique to your niche audience that you're going after, because you're in a creative position to where you really can't do anything wrong. You can keep learning from all of those decisions, but it's only going to either trend towards your ultimate goal, which you start to refine, with all of these experimental, attempts, or you're going to realize, okay, hey, we were going in the wrong direction, and understanding exactly where to pivot. So I think, when you look at a lot of successes, out there, I mean, I think one of the conversations we have all the time is, you look at brands like White Claw, right? They are great for what they do for their specific demographic, for younger, ready to drink, audiences. They got into the flavored vodka space recently, which was, I think, a lot of people, and there's a lot of conversations trending online where people are like, is this really the direction I thought White Claw was going to go in? Is this something that, are they filling, a need from that audience? I mean, obviously, time will tell. I would say within the next 5 years, we'll know whether or not this gambit has paid off. But, again, they, are taking a chance, because a lot of people recognize White Claw for the flavors, for the colors associated, and they're like, let's, continue this kind of heritage of what has worked for us. So I think it's a great chance, to take that risk. But, again, whether or not that's going to pay off, knowing their audience, and, whether or not they're looking to recruit new consumers, that, time will tell. But there's a lot to be said about, those risks in terms of trying to set them.
Hey everybody, I'm taking a quick break here to tell you about Video Fresh. So if you are an e-commerce seller that needs some video content made, that is what we do. So my team does amazing work creating these really beautiful looking product videos that are great for Amazon ads, for your product listing pages, for social media, anything you need. We make the process really, really easy. So if you're interested, visit videofresh.co and let me know if you listen to the podcast and what you think. All right, let's get back to the show. Yeah, that's a great way to put it. It's always a risk. You never really know. You have to make your best conjecture as to what's going to work and what the market is going to really feel like is on brand for you and respond to in a very positive way. And I know Coca Cola is another example of a brand that has been setting the trends for an incredible amount of time. I think it's over 100 years, or maybe a good bit more than that. What can we learn from Coca Cola and how they have kind of, wrote the playbook in a way on branding across incredible amounts of time throughout all kinds of different cultures.
Yeah, no, I'm absolutely very excited to always talk about Coca-Cola. I think one of the things, and we bring it up in meetings all the time here, of exactly what it means to be a legacy brand, something that you know um, can transcend generations and have that universal appeal. I mean, you show someone a Coca-Cola ad now, and it's relevant to anyone, between the ages of 5 and 99. Um, None of their messaging is ever focused on a time or place, but it's focused on a feeling. It's focused on, an occasion, on something that can be shared. And so that's how you kind of create that universality of a brand. But again, not everyone's Coca-Cola. You know, Not everyone has access to, the swath of distribution that Coca-Cola has in the world. But that's not to say that, once you do understand your audience and their place in time and that gives you a lot more insight into how to maintain that growth throughout future generations, right? Because going back to White Claw, right? Those younger drinkers in 20 years, they'll remember having drank White Claw. The question is, what is their sentiment going to be in 20 years about White Claw? Is it going to be fond memories? Is it going to be, this is the time I had the best time of my life with my friends, my family, whatever that is, and then being able to play into those emotions in the future is what's going to again set that longevity. And again, like Coca-Cola is so classic and it is timeless in a way. You can look at any of the merchandising, the billboards, the case cards, everything that they've made and touched has that sentiment of this is something you'll find in a time capsule. This is something that if it gets unearthed 200 years later, people will be like, "That's cool. That's a Coke ad," and that will still feed into their strategy 200 years later.
Yeah, it's so incredible. And I think you bring up a great point that a lot of what a brand is are these associations, these associated emotions. It goes beyond the product. It's like what's happening around the product. And then when you brand that product and when you create marketing materials and when you create, brand activations or whatever the case may be, that's really what you're doing is you're trying to make those associations, reinforce those associations, maybe resonate with pre-existing associations and things like that. And obviously, yeah, Coke kind of. I don't know if they really wrote the playbook on that or not, but they're certainly one of the best case studies out there. And a lot of the people listening to this show, they're going to be like e-commerce sellers. They're going to have like they're not Coca-Cola, perhaps. Some of them I'm sure will be someday. But a lot of them, maybe they're doing, under $1 million, over $1 million a year in sales. What would be your advice to brands like that are really trying to find their voice? They're trying to find their audience. They're trying to find those brand associations and those lifestyle moments. And like, what would be, because they're not Coca-Cola and they probably shouldn't use the same playbook, right? And they're also not Stella Rosa Wines. And so what would your advice be to them when it comes to branding, and also when it comes to really, the trends that kind of come and go in marketing as well.
Yeah, I mean, e-commerce is 100% a different beast from what we see in terms of success for Stella Rosa, right? Because a lot of what we've, kind of honed throughout the decades is the relationships we have with our retailers, and ensuring we have, these prime placements where you're able to see all of the different, flavors and SKUs, and there's something for everyone. But, when you look at the online e-commerce space, it's far more narrow in terms of understanding that consumer journey. They're not coming to your site or to your e-retailer, shopping page with, the idea of browsing. I'm not just going to kind of see what's available. There's usually a stronger intent. So honing in on understanding what the intent is of your audience is obviously key. And, it's real easy to say, like, sure, you can rewrite that funnel every day, understanding, your niche audience, but look at the tools that are available to everyone, right? TikTok is something everyone talks about. Even people who don't understand it talk about it. And that's what's impressive and amazing. And so you have a chance to learn that these users are searching on TikTok for how-tos to just learn about the world around them. So if you approach TikTok the way you're approaching your, SEM SEO strategy, you'll be in a good position to reach people who may not have even considered, your product or service. But again, that content is now what's going to be more important than ever because it has to be relevant. It has to be genuine. It can't just be an ad of, hey guys, check this out. I really like this. You should like it too. Integrate it into a lifestyle, integrate it into an occasion. If you even just see something 7 times on 7 different videos, if you can figure out, the commonalities between, specific spheres of influence on TikTok, you'll be in a great position where no one's going to be able to get away from it on their FYPs. So like it's important to be smart about it, but not expect those immediate results, right? Because e-commerce is 100% reliant on intent, and it is not, again, the same situation with Stella Rosa with the retail space. So I think that's an interesting challenge and kind of fun in a way because again, as all these tools keep developing, I mean, Threads, for example,
Yep.
people were hopping on it immediately. And I think I saw an article today, it might have been like Gizmodo or something, where they're like the engagement of Threads is significantly dropping off now. So it's like,
Yep.
why is that? Was it because the experience wasn't authentic? Were the tools not in place to really create a success here? How are you going to get that engagement back up? So it's it's important and goes back to what you're saying about trends. Don't chase the trends. Just because everyone's creating a Threads account doesn't mean it's important right now. But you can understand, hey, does Threads work for me? Does this work for my audience? And, then make those decisions. But yeah, if you just, go where all the corporations are going, you're just going to be, a little guppy against these big fish, and it's just not worth your time or effort.
Right, and that's such a great analogy too. I feel like uh, how like zebras they all run together because when they run together, like you don't see any one zebra; they're just all part of this big stampede or whatever. But then if there's one straggler zebra, that's where the lions, or whatever it is, a lion, I guess. That's where their attention goes.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know much about animals. But it's kind of the same thing. Whereas like if you're chasing the trend, that's a reliable way to kind of become invisible in a way, right? You kind of want to do something different. The other brand I love that did that was like Liquid Death.
Oh yeah.
Like they're just like, let's just be the most ironic water brand of all time and just be like hardcore with everything. And it's almost just like this. It's a kind of like a joke. It's like a kind of a parody joke or something is how I feel
Yeah.
about it. And it works so well. It's impossible to ignore. So yeah, I do think that sometimes following trends instead of making trends is actually, it can just kind of have the reverse effect where you kind of disappear into the ocean of everyone else doing that same thing. But yeah, Threads is interesting. Do you have are you still on Threads? Are you a user? Did you like try it for a day and bounce like
Exactly.
I might
Yeah,
have done? Yeah.
because and that was genius on Meta's part though of you log into Instagram and you get the splash pop up, hey, Threads is up, you should join. Okay, connect. And it was so easy, but then you get there and you're like, well, this is just Burger King. This is just again, you're seeing all these brands that are just like, hey, I'm a corporate entity. How do you do, fellow kids? And it's just not it's not genuine. You immediately know, like, okay, this is not the Twitter replacement people thought it was going to be. It's just not set up in that way. But again, if you are a prevalent Instagram user and you have consistent communications through that platform, this is another tool that can help you. But I don't imagine more than 20% of Instagram users are going to see any value in it, like in its current form.
In its current
Obviously
form.
things can change, but yeah, in its current form right now, it's like wheat pasting on a wall.
Yeah, it's so interesting. It seems like it's an interesting case study where you had like a crazy high response rate, right? So like they had this insanely high top of funnel response, but the retention drop off uh, was pretty intense. But I think it's because it was. I think a lot of people didn't even quite know what they were
Right.
signing on for, right? And then
Yeah.
they kind of were like, I don't know, am I going to use this? But I think it'll probably. I'm guessing it'll kind of creep back up over time or something.
Yeah.
I've been kind of considering like, what would my threads like content strategy be or whatever.
Yeah, and that's
But
a great point because I think that's what it's going to come back to is it's going to be the users who will now determine the best way to use this tool. It's not going to be the brands or the corporations. So the
that's
brands and
smart.
corporations should sit back and see what the users want to do with it. That's why we got the great Wendy's content on Twitter because Wendy's was able
Right.
to examine behavioral patterns of these insane Twitter users and then just regurgitate it and people ate it up. And I think that's what's genius about like that sit and wait approach with these new techs, with these new platforms. Because even though you think you know how to use it, you don't. You're gonna have to wait for a 17-year-old with free time to tell you the best way to use it.
That's so true. Yeah, because every brand, every social media platform ends up kind of evolving and kind of settling into a place culturally. Like, Instagram. I guess it depends like what's on your feed. I feel like my Instagram is like so much of it's just meme content, right? Like it's so
Oh
much of
yeah.
it, more than probably any other platform, right? But it started off as like, oh, this is a place to post like your personal photography or whatever, and it's just become kind of a meme platform for so many people, I guess. And you could probably curate that into other things, but I think that's just so much of what's out there. And then you have LinkedIn's a platform that has stayed really authentic, in my opinion. I mean, there's kind of a slow pivot towards towards other kinds of content, but it still tends to be very very intentional. It's more serious. It's still like holding its ground in terms of like this is a place for professionals to talk about professional things. Even
Right.
though someone will post a silly meme once in a while and everyone goes haha, and then okay, back to business, right? So it's
Right.
like
Exactly.
I like that about LinkedIn. Like it's so true. Like every platform has to kind of find itself, and Threads could go a lot of directions at this point. But yeah, I think this is a great example of a trend. It's a trend that has kind of come out of left field, and brands definitely are having the shiny object syndrome about it. And oh, we just have to be here because it's really FOMO, I think, for the most part. But
Hmm.
yeah, is there anything else that you want to kind of leave the e-commerce community with? And I know that your brand does do a certain degree of e-commerce, I suppose,
Right.
but
Yeah.
primarily you are retail. You're on the shelves. You're in grocery stores and liquor stores and so many places. But yeah, what is there any kind of actionable takeaways that you could leave our audience with, things that they can leave thinking about with their brands, thinking about, maybe even something actionable they can do to kind of think about their brand in some of the ways we talked about. Think about, are there trends that I'm like wasting my time on? Are there things I should be doing that are going to be more worthwhile, earn more attention, be more true to who they are?
Yeah. I think one of the most recent exercises we're going through right now is ensuring that a lot of our um, shelf spaces, digital shelf spaces, are aligned and ensuring that it speaks in a way that, still carries that brand tone and messaging forward, but at the same time, obviously it serves a purpose, right? You have just a few carousel slots to put in some snippets of maybe a review, maybe a cocktail recipe, but all of that still needs to be into, this is what I recognize from the brick and mortars, this is what I recognize from seeing it in my grandmother's kitchen. Like, it all still needs to feel that authentic, and it's real easy to fall into the trap of, it's, yeah, I understand, here's my 600 by 600 image, just plug it in. Obviously I'll just generate traffic to the page, and that's more important to me, is the that marketing aspect, that marketing strategy aspect of it. But again, consider the intent. When somebody gets there, remind them that, and I'll bring Stella Rosa into this again, but remind them that this is the beverage that you're familiar with, that this looks exactly how it would in your hand. A an occasion, a lifestyle photo can go a long way of generating an authentic emotion, an emotional response. You mentioned FOMO earlier with the brands, but create a sensation of FOMO of seeing a lifestyle photo that you want to be in, and especially if you look at positioning in terms of, like, let's bring up Walmart, like compare Walmart to a Target shelf space, right? Those consumers might be sharing that space. I personally shop at both Walmart and Target, but there are people who just don't. So consider that intent. If they're looking to purchase summertime snacks, you better have some pictures of people enjoying it out on the lawn, on a blanket or on a roof deck, or something that again transcends the opportunity of, hey, I just need to add this to my cart. you know so I think that to me is, that speaks more to the brand in a digital sense, within e-commerce. But obviously every product and service is different. Know your audience and know what they're looking for. And at the same time, I think it's always important to ask, you know, ask these people in their comments on social media, reach out and say, how did you find us? What do you think about us? And don't be afraid of the criticisms, because I know, personally, we have a lot of engagement on our feeds, and a lot of very invested consumers who will just say, like, why don't you bring this flavor back, or why did you change this? I liked this. And get into their head and understand, like, okay, this can't just be the only person who thinks. So I don't know, I'm kind of going all over the place here.
Yeah, those are like really good takeaways, really actionable things for e-commerce sellers to take away. Ask questions to your customers, listen really carefully, and see if you can find any of those trends. And then I think your customers, and that feedback loop with your customers, is how a smaller brand can begin to learn who it is. Because I also feel like the brand is kind of this dance. It's kind of this feedback loop with the brand and the customer base. It's not just a one-way relationship, right?
Right.
It's this collaborative relationship where you need to learn what is happening on the customer side, and then you need to have that flow right back into the brand, and then you really get something strong. You get something really lasting. But yeah, I guess we can end on this. So Stella Rosa Wines, what's next over the next 5, 10, 50 years? What do you think the future holds?
I think Stella Rosa Brandy was the first step into that, wild unknown in a way, but it wasn't so unknown. I mean, I think for us, recognizing that a path of premiumization for our consumers is very important. You have your first bottle of Stella Rosa, maybe because, your family, picks it up because you're, new to the wine category, but then realizing that there is now also a sparkling collection that you can try with some prosecco, some great, Moscato, something like that, and then have a VS very special line of prosecco that is great for engagements or weddings, and then you lead into the brandy. So I think that has been this wonderful setup of just again responding to the consumer's idea of what Stella Rosa is in their lives because it answers these calls for occasions. We get so many, and I have a stack of letters on my desk right now of wedding invitations. People literally write us and send us wedding invites and say we would love you to be at our wedding. And
Oh
sometimes
my
we'll send a
gosh.
rep with like a case of bottles and just to celebrate with them at the reception or whatever. But it's like you can't ask for that. Like people just start doing it, and a lot of people came to that conclusion collectively, which is insane. So
That's
like
awesome.
there's a moment in time aspect to that of people feel so strongly about the brand, you know, and they want to share a special moment in their lives. So that's why, we focus so much on, well, let's find those moments and let's find a way to be a part of them. And I think that's what we'll start to see in the next, decade or so is, just this continuing feedback of, we're here, we're I'm thinking of Succession when, we here for you, but
Yeah.
sorry.
Best
Yeah,
show,
no,
best
so
show in the last 10 years, by the way. So
let me
good.
tell you, I love
So
it.
good.
I was a fan of Cousin Greg till the end, but
Yep. Cousin
yeah, no,
Greg.
I think 100% it's finding those moments to be a part of and being being able to comfort and create that sense of heritage and nostalgia that's going to continue to feed into our success because I think you have a very strong opportunity to embrace the humanity that we constantly fear, are in fear of losing. I think the world's a scary place and the earth is burning, but at the same time, it's important to share a glass of wine with a loved one.
Kip, thank you so much for being on the E-commerce Pros podcast. So many good insights, so many good analogies, takeaways, action items. Yeah, wishing you a great rest of the summer here, and we look forward to having you back on the podcast sometime in the future.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Really appreciate it, Rob.